Some of the most classic games started out as indie games. Today we're gonna go over some indie games that have ended up becoming absolute classics. Classics. Whether it's music, movies, or video games, everything has classics. When you think of classic video games, what do you think of? Maybe Super Mario, The Legend of Zelda, Minecraft, maybe even Terraria. You know what all of these have in common? They all started out as indie games. We usually think all of these classic titles were made by big studios. Mario Odyssey and Zelda Breath of the Wild obviously aren't indie games, but the original Mario and the original Zelda, that's indie. Good old Hollow Knight. Many know it as one of the best games of all time. Hollow Knight released in a very fitting year, being 2017. I believe this year was the best ever year for indie games. We had Cuphead, we had Little Nightmares, we also got What Remains of Edith Finch, and the obvious big one, Hollow Knight. A game like Hollow Knight fit the year of 2017. If Hollow Knight released in 2018, it would be a little out of place. Hollow Knight, while still taking inspiration, it took inspiration from older games, such as Zelda 2. But it did its own thing. There's not many games that you can fully compare to Hollow Knight. It's just kind of Hollow Knight. Another game that is also very much one of a kind is the Stanley Parable. The narrator presents the story to the player. He explains that the protagonist Stanley is employee 427 in an office building. Stanley is tasked to monitor data coming from a computer screen and press buttons appropriately without question. One day, the screen monitoring data goes blank, which has never happened before. Stanley, unclear on what to do, begins to explore the building and discovers that the workplace is completely abandoned. The Stanley Parable did something extremely different, and it was like a backrooms game before backrooms games, but you had a narrator in your ear most of the time. One of the biggest, if not the most well-known indie game of all time, Undertale. Even people who haven't played it or even heard the word Undertale know something from this game, that being the song Megalovania. Undertale is a 2015 top-down RPG. You play as a child who has fallen into the underground, a large secluded region under the surface of the earth, separated by some sort of magical barrier. Undertale has a pixel art style, but it doesn't look as modern as something like Stardew Valley or Terraria. It does look straight out of the 90s. The story and lore is far too deep for one video. Comment down below if you'd be interested in a full breakdown on the story and gameplay of Undertale. A game that has been put at the number 10 spot for best-selling video games of all time, Terraria. Whether you like it or not, you've probably played it or known somebody obsessed with it. Terraria kind of followed in the footsteps of Minecraft, but it's been able to make a name for itself as one of the best video games of all time. I know people who have been playing it since it came out and still haven't finished it. The fact that only 10 people managed to put something as colossal as Terraria together is mind-boggling. Terraria, being this pixel graphic 2D sandbox, gives players infinite opportunities. I still to this day remember first spawning into Terraria. Another indie game that has ended up becoming a classic is The Binding of Isaac. Not as classic as Terraria, but for many people, it's a classic. The Binding of Isaac is a roguelike. Roguelike is traditionally characterized by a dungeon crawl through procedurally generated levels, turn-based gameplay, grid-based movement, and permanent death of the player character. I personally find this game to be pretty funny, especially the place where this game takes place, Isaac's basement. The Binding of Isaac's plot is very loosely inspired by the biblical story of the same name. This game is also one of a kind. There's roguelikes similar to it, but you won't find something that perfectly mimics the charm of the game. A game that was heavily popularized by the early 2010s Let's Play YouTubers such as Jacksepticeye and Markiplier, that game is Papers, Please. The gameplay of Papers, Please focuses on the work life of an immigration inspector at the border checkpoint for the fictional country of Arstotzka in the year 1982. As a checkpoint inspector, the player reviews arrivals documents and uses an array of tools to determine whether the papers are in order for the purpose of arresting certain individuals such as terrorists, wanted criminals, smugglers, and entrants with forged or stolen documents, keeping other undesired individuals like those missing required paperwork or expired paperwork out of the country and allowing the rest through. Papers, Please was a very relaxing game. There was no intense gameplay, but it required you to think and also reevaluate some of your moral choices. A game that often comes up as the best game of all time or the best indie game of all time is Minecraft. The game being the #1 best-selling game of all time, selling a whopping 238 million copies. I don't believe the game to be indie. Yes, one person made the first version of it and a lot of the early versions of it, but since then, Minecraft has expanded into this massive franchise, making toys, clothes, and even more Minecraft games. Before I end off this video, I quickly want to mention that the reason I didn't cover games like Cuphead and Stardew Valley was because I already covered them a decent bit in my last video. I highly encourage you to watch that one as well. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to click that big red subscribe button as well as the little bell icon to get notified whenever I upload. Comment down below any other indie games that you think can be considered classics. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day, and I'm out.